Welcome to the deep dive. So today we've got a really interesting mix for you.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at a conversation from the YouTube channel Speak English Smartly.
Okay.
Christine, Robinson, and Nancy. They start off talking about listening skills and language learning. Really crucial stuff.
Right. Foundational.
Exactly. But then they pivot. They shift into talking about Justin Bieber.
Justin Bieber. Okay, that is a mix. Interesting.
Yeah. So our mission really is to pull out some key ideas about, how listening actually helps us learn languages.
And then maybe explore some angles on Bieber's story
Yeah,
that people might not think about much beyond just the headlines.
exactly. And we're pulling all this from their YouTube video transcript. It's called Learn English with a Celebrity Podcast for Improving English Podcast for English Learning.
Got it. So language learning through listening first.
Yeah, let's dive into that. They kick off with this idea that, well, listening isn't passive. It's not just background noise when you're learning a language.
Mhm.
It's actually like doing real work in your brain.
Absolutely. Robinson makes a great point there. When you're, actively listening, your brain's processing. It's not just hearing.
Right.
It goes beyond just understanding the words right now. It's building this sort of subconscious framework. Helps with understanding later on, like building a mental library almost.
And that active listening, it connects to other skills too, right? Like Christine mentions, it helps your pronunciation and your vocabulary.
Totally. It trains your ear, essentially. When you really listen to how things sound, the rhythm, the ups and downs.
Intonation.
Exactly. Intonation. You start to pick those patterns up naturally. And then, as Christine says, you can start to mimic them.
Okay. So it makes your own speech sound more natural.
Precisely. It's not just knowing what a word means, but how it sounds in a real sentence. How people actually say it, doing things like shadowing.
Where you repeat what you hear.
Yeah, immediately after you hear it.
Right.
That can really sharpen things up. Pronunciation, flow.
Okay, but here's something they point out that's quite interesting. A lot of language learners, maybe they focus more on speaking
Oh.
or grammar rules.
Common trap.
And listening kind of gets left behind. Why do you think that happens?
Well, I guess speaking feels more active. Like you're doing something obvious. And grammar feels like, a solid structure you can hold on to.
Right, like a safety net.
Yeah. But the thing is, listening, consistent, engaged listening, it's the foundation. Without a strong listening base, the other skills don't stand up as well.
And they use a really good example how kids learn their first language. Nancy talks about this.
Oh, yeah, the immersion aspect.
Right. They learn mainly just by listening.
Huh?
And interacting, obviously. But they're just absorbing everything around them. Sounds, words, how sentences fit together.
And it's incredibly effective, isn't it? Kids don't sit down with grammar books in the beginning. They just soak it up. From parents, from TV, from playing. It really shows how powerful that constant exposure is.
Christine makes that point, too. Kids aren't consciously learning grammar rules when they start talking.
Not at all.
They just sort of absorb the patterns. They hear things used correctly, see how people react, and it just clicks. It's pattern recognition, not formal study.
Exactly. They get the underlying structure without needing the labels.
Yeah.
Which maybe suggests that as adult learners, we could, benefit from creating more listening immersion for ourselves.
Focusing more on the flow and the meaning, maybe less on every single grammar point.
Yeah, at least sometimes.
Yeah.
Don't get bogged down too much.
Okay, so that's a really useful perspective on listening. Then, like we said, the conversation shifts. Nancy brings up Justin Bieber.
Right. The pivot.
Big pivot. I mean, who doesn't know Justin Bieber, right?
Yeah.
Pop star. Huge phenomenon as a teenager.
Oh, absolutely. Nancy nails the initial impression. Massive fame. Really young. And yeah, that song, Baby.
Oh, don't remind me.
It was inescapable for a while there. You could almost think of that intense fame as its own kind of immersion, actually. Well, just being thrown into that world, the language of celebrity, media, constant attention from such a young age. Very different context, obviously, but intense exposure.
That's an interesting way to put it. Okay, so they look at his story a bit. His age comes up. Nancy guesses late 20s.
And he's 29, they confirm.
Yeah, which feels surprisingly young, considering how long he's been around.
It really does. He's been famous for, over a decade? That's a huge chunk of his life under that spotlight, navigating the language of that industry, like I said.
The money. Nancy mentions a report, something like $80 million a year.
80 million, yeah. It's staggering.
Just hard to wrap your head around. Robinson asks listeners, what would you do with that?
Right. It really highlights the scale. And you have to wonder psychologically what having that kind of wealth, especially starting so young, does to a person. The pressures, the expectations.
For sure. But what I found really grounding was when they talked about his beginnings. Christine brings this up.
The YouTube days.
Yeah. Posting cover songs, humble beginnings, relatively speaking. It's easy to forget that now he's this massive global brand.
That's such an important part of his narrative, though. It wasn't like manufactured instantly by a label.
Right.
There was that initial online buzz showing his talent directly.
Kind of a testament to how platforms like YouTube changed things.
Definitely. Gave people direct access.
And his mom was key in that early stage, wasn't she? Christine really stresses her role.
Yeah, getting a notice. His dad was supportive, too. Apparently more on the business side, behind the scenes.
But his mom, Christine calls her his rock. Single parent, really believing in him. That kind of support. It's often make or break, isn't it?
Absolutely. That initial champion can be the difference maker. You see it across so many fields.
So moving on through his career, they mention his musical output, over 100 songs.
Yeah, albums, singles, collaborations. The guy's been busy.
He really has. Staying relevant in pop music for that long, constantly creating, that takes some serious work ethic.
It does. Shows dedication and also adaptability, I think. The music scene changes so fast.
And it's not just music. Nancy asks about charity work.
Does he give back?
Turns out, yes, quite a bit. They mention Pencils of Promise, building schools.
Oh, that's great.
And big donations to kids' hospitals, like $500,000 to the Children's Wish Foundation in Canada.
Wow. Okay. That's significant.
Yeah, it's a side that maybe doesn't get as much airtime.
Definitely adds another layer to the picture. It's good to see people with that kind of platform using it for positive things. Suggests, a sense of responsibility.
Then they touch on his personal life, his marriage to Hailey Baldwin.
Right, Hailey Bieber now, model from the Baldwin family.
They got married in 2018, and when this conversation happened, they were expecting their first child.
And they share quite a bit online, don't they? Seems like a pretty solid relationship from the outside.
Yeah, which in that high-pressure celebrity world must be quite grounding, a challenge to maintain, I'd imagine.
Definitely. Having that stable personal anchor when you've been famous since you were a kid, probably vital.
Okay, now looping back to language just for a second. Nancy asks about Bieber's own language skills.
Ah, the initial theme returns.
Briefly. So, obviously, Canadian, first language English.
Right.
But he also speaks some French, which makes sense, Canada being bilingual.
One of the official languages.
And apparently he's used it in interviews sometimes. So, little connection back.
It's a neat little tie-in. Shows how your environment can naturally expose you to other languages.
And this leads them to a really interesting tangent. Why do actors often seem to pick up English so fast when they work internationally?
Ah, yeah, the Hollywood effect. Seems like they just suddenly become fluent.
What's the secret sauce there?
Well, Robinson explains it's not really magic. It's about the environment. It's incredibly immersive.
How so?
Think about it. On set all day, surrounded by English speakers. International crews often use English as the common language.
Total immersion.
Total immersion. Plus, they often get dedicated language coaches, helping with lines, pronunciation, everything. It's super focused.
And the motivation must be massive.
Huge. Like you said earlier, their job literally depends on it. They need to communicate effectively, deliver lines convincingly.
Which stakes are really high.
Exactly. So that drives intense practice. They have to use the language.
Christine also mentions confidence, how actors seem less worried about making mistakes, even if their English isn't perfect yet.
Yeah, that's a big one for language learners, that fear of messing up.
Totally.
But Robinson points out, it's the constant use that builds confidence. The more you speak, even with errors, the more comfortable you get.
The immersion kind of forces them past that fear.
Pretty much. You just have to communicate. And you learn by doing. It's a good lesson. Actually, mistakes are just part of learning.
Yeah. I say errors are just part of the journey. Keep using it, you get better, you worry less. That's encouraging.
It really is. Normalizing mistakes is key to getting fluent. Takes the pressure off.
Okay, finally, the conversation takes a more serious turn. They discuss some of the challenges Justin Bieber has faced.
Right, the tougher times.
His public struggles with mental health, anxiety, depression. Especially when he was younger, dealing with all that fame.
It's hard to fathom that level of scrutiny as a teenager. The pressure must have been immense, constant spotlight.
Highlights the downside of that extreme fame, especially so young.
Definitely the potential human cost.
They mention he announced a break in 2019 to focus on mental health, relationships.
Which was probably a very necessary step.
He's also talked about his faith helping him and his marriage to Haley being supportive.
Mm-hmm. Having that support system.
And they mention a close friend, too, Ryan Butler, as being a stable figure for him. It just shows, doesn't it? No matter how famous or successful.
You still need that support network. Mental well-being, strong connections, they're fundamental human needs.
And him speaking openly about it, that helps too, right? Reducing stigma around mental health.
Absolutely. It takes courage, especially with his platform.
So wrapping this all up, quite a journey in this conversation. We started with the real nuts and bolts of language learning, how vital listening is, that active engagement.
Yeah, really tuning in, not just hearing.
And then we shifted to Justin Bieber, exploring things beyond the music. You know, his start, the sheer scale of his career, his charity work, family, but also the very real struggles he's navigated.
That's a good reminder, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everyone's got a complex story behind the public image. Triumphs, challenges, the whole lot.
Definitely. So here's maybe a final thought to leave you with. Think about that actor analogy. The focused practice, the immersive environment that helps them learn languages so quickly.
Hmm.
Could there be parallels in your own life? What kind of focused, maybe even immersive environment could be physical, mental, social? Could you create for yourself to really accelerate learning or achieve something important to you? What would that look like?